Hello again and welcome to my basement machine shop. This is Mr. Pete, your YouTube shop teacher once again. And I'm starting a new project right now, and it'll probably be a two-part video. And what are you going to make this time, you say? You, the man with the magnificent obsession of vices. Well, I'm going to make another vise, yes. And it is a hand vise. Perhaps you never heard of a hand vise. Let me explain what it is, but I guarantee you, you don't need one, but I'm going to make one anyway. And you might find many of the operations that I am going to perform as interesting. This will not be made of casting, so I'm giving you a break on foundry and casting. So this will be made out of billet stock, aluminum bar stock. All right, let me show you what this is. I've had this hand vise for many years. It is die-cast zinc. It is rather nicely made, although I think it's probably a fairly cheap item. But the purpose of it is for you to hold small items that you're making and do finishing work like filing or fitting and things like that. So that's the purpose of a hand vise. Now do not confuse it with a pin vise. Now a pin vise has a little chuck and it will hold round items while you do similar work. You might hold your work in this while you're on a grinder or a sander or something like that too. So, and pin vises come in many sizes, some of them much smaller than what I have in my hand here. I've got a whole set of them around here someplace. This is a double ender. So there's the pin vises. This is a hand vise, and this is what Here's a small bench vise that I acquired not too terribly long ago. You might remember the auction where I brought this home. I darn near I did throw it away. Later on I went through the junk pile and pulled it out because I thought, well, this might be good for Henry or somebody. And you know, it's not much larger than this, so I used both of these for inspiration in designing the little hand vise that I will make in this video. I'm not sure why I always work over in this corner. You know, why don't I get out in the middle here? Well, here's my prototype. I generally make a prototype very similar to this. 1.25 inch wide jaws. Opens up on, I don't know, a 1/2 inch, doesn't matter. Now, my intention here was to, at some point, cut this off. You know, I got a handle. You got to have a handle when you build something small. So this is the handle that's going to be cut off. This needs to be narrowed a little bit. And in other words, so there's a stud that could go into a handle, and this is a file handle. I'm not sure I'm going to do that, because this makes kind of a nice little, well, let's call it a jeweler's vise. I'll show you what I mean. I know, I'll get around to building it, but I got to explain things first. Sometimes a 4-inch bench vise is a little bit too big for delicate work, so this handle could be held in a vise and used like that. Or like that. I got a little more slop in there than what I wanted. If you are a regular viewer of my channel, you may remember that I sometimes use this little vise, this little jeweler's vise, in my Colombian vise to do small work. This is a pretty little vise. I like this. Cast iron. No, it's not. It's die cast. Dovetail. And you know what? That's about 1.25 inches also. Smaller. Again, a man of many vices. You know, I didn't work from plans. I usually do not, although sometimes I make sketches. You know, I have attention deficit like some of you. So I'm sitting there watching YouTube videos on my 55-inch TV, smart set, and I make some sketches. So, you know, that's the general idea of what I was doing. Oh, and then I had a temper tantrum and had a waste the next day. Because what is with the erasers on pencils being almost worthless? Look at how they smudge. And I'm not talking about pencils that are 20 years old. I'm talking about pencils that are 20 weeks old. They mastered the eraser in 1880. But no, they can't make them anymore. So I went to Walmart and I bought a whole package of these. They probably will get hard too, I don't know, but at least now I got an eraser when I do my sketching. And while I was at it, I picked up a 2-pack. You know, you couldn't buy just one, you got to buy 2. It's like shoelaces. And now I'm ranting. But little things like that really bug me. Like, well, why is it that difficult to make an eraser that actually works on a pencil? I mean, we sent a man to the moon, or so they say. I started to apologize for the rant, but I'm not sorry. But anyway, in my sketches, I get an idea of the proportion that I need. Now, I showed you a little slop in my sample there, but notice that this one uses 2 guide bars. But that makes it a little more complicated, a little more difficult to make. So then, the next day, after I get back from Walmart and my tantrum, I make one out of wood. That's number 1, by the way, in case you didn't figure that out. And, you know, a fella could and did waste, you know, half a day on something like this. Even though it's wood, I'm not sure I gained or saved much time by making it out of wood, and that's just pine. Then I made one out of Delron. That's as far as I got, but you get an idea there from the sketch. But that's what I finally decided would be my design. Where did it go here? That's my design. Now, I'm not giving any dimensions on this because I doubt anybody will make it, but I think it's, again, you might enjoy seeing all the different operations. And this is billet aluminum, and in a few minutes I'm going to show you just some real quick footage on the milling machine where I milled the blocks down 1¼ inch by 1¼ inch. Naturally, I didn't have any stock that I needed. Why 2? Well, I just ended up with 2. I count on goofing one up, you know. That's almost a given, isn't it? My friend David, who lives in Minnesota but used to live in St. Louis, sent me a lot of aluminum and other bar stock a few years ago, and it came, I think he said, from the Anheuser-Busch factory. And I do mean factory. So anyway, imagine how hard that was to cut that. It took me forever. The stock got so hot I couldn't touch it. I need some new blades. I need some skip tooth blades. But anyway, that's why you see a hole in there. I just sawed the piece in 2, so now I have 2 1¼ inch blocks, 5 inches long, just in case I screw one up. But now I need to mill that down so it's exactly 1¼ inch. Okay, I'd like to get started on the layout here. And I will be changing a few dimensions and modifying just a little bit from the prototype here, because already I thought of a couple improvements, but the order of operations in drilling and milling and everything are reasonably important. So I want to drill these 2 holes first for the screw and the guide pin, and then mill this slot. So the first thing I'll do here is to draw a center line. I'm going to use the height gauge, so already preset, and that's 625 in from the side. Remember, this is 1¼ inch by 1¼ inch. The square is set for 1 1/16. That's the screw hole, and then a 1/2 inch down from that, preset here again. To expedite things, that's the guide pin hole. Let me get those center punched and let's go to the drill press. Now this can be done on the milling machine or the drill press. And yes, I've decided to use the milling machine. I use the drill press for this. I've just located the center and the first hole and set the DRO for 0. And the first thing I'll do is to center drill it, and then I'm going to drill this main hole for the screw 1/4 inch, because 1/4 inch is the tap drill size for the screw, which is 5/16 18. This is a 1/4 inch guide rod. I think I'll ream that hole. I don't know if it's necessary, but I think I'm going to ream that. But I need to remove the parallels here because I'm going to drill all the way through, and let me set up the center drill. I'm going to move down 1/2 inch and center drill the other one so I don't have to change tools. And I was watching the DRO. Be sure and wear your safety glasses. This is a 15/64 drill bit. This is a 1/4 inch reamer. This is a 1/4 inch drill bit. It is the tap drill size for the 5/16 18 screw. Double check your drill bit sizes. This is a 5/16 drill bit. This is the clearance size, of course, for the 5/16 18, and I'm going to drill that same hole, not all the way through though, approximately this deep, and it will serve as a guide for the tap so I get the tap straight. Of course, it would be easy to tap straight because I'm in the milling machine, but you might well be using a drill press where it's harder to get the hole drilled and tapped straight. And if you misdrill these holes and do not get them straight and parallel in both axes, you will have a binding and you will be pouting about it. I have set the depth stop. I do like to use WD-40 as a cutting fluid for aluminum. It's quite good for that. And matter of fact, to me, that's the only thing it's good for. This is a 5/16 18 plug tap. I'm going to attempt to power tap it. That'll assure straightness. I'm in back gears, and I'm going to run the tap in approximately to where the thread ends here on the shank. See how that works. Now I'm hand tapping until the tap goes all the way through and drops out the bottom. I should have tapped a little deeper when I was still on the milling. Well, something I'm using is a solvent for the bluing. I don't know if it's the WD-40 or that tapping fluid, but when I wiped it, look at that. Well, these two holes are done, and now I will turn my attention to 90 degrees. I'm going to put some bluing on here and start the layout here. So essentially, I'm laying out several holes here so that I can rough the material. In other words, drill a lot of the material out, and then I'm going over to the milling machine with a 5/8 end mill and mill a slot, and I will lay out the lengths. I believe this is about 5/16 thick already. I have flattened the top, but it's approximately almost 400,000, so it was a little more than that. Remember, I don't have any drawing. I'm kind of referring back to this, so I won't show all of that layout. I'll show it to you after I'm done with it. 5/8 radius. I measured 1 7/8 from the top and marked it and even center punched it, and with my dividers set at 5/16 I've already made a radius there, and now I'm going to do the same thing on the other end. I can barely see this. I'm not used to working this small, and I do have my op divisors on. So that is the extent of the slot. I really like the Starrett center punches, and I have them in several sizes, and I also have here, I think this is a Starrett, yeah, the square one, because it doesn't roll off my tilted bench. Well, I've center punched 3 holes there. The 2 outer ones will be 1/2 inch. Remember, I am just roughing the material out of there. I could just go to the milling machine and mill that, but I just soon get some of it out of there. So there'll be 2 1/2 inch holes, and the middle one, it'll be less than half, whatever will fit in there. Probably be more like a 5/16. And what I forgot to tell you is that as I drill, the chips swirl around and knock off a lot of the bluing, a lot of my layout. So sometimes I have to go back, you know, it'll look like this. It's hard to see what I have done. When I used the height gauge, I like to scribe it extra deep because those marks are indelible even if the bluing is gone. To the drill press I go, or that could be done on the mill. Well, I use the micro drill to spot them. It might be unnecessary. I just wanted to point out that as I drill these holes, they will interfere with these other holes, which I don't really care about, but it can cause a small drill bit to deflect. It's coming along nicely. Before I go to the milling machine and mill out the slot, I think I'll round these corners off, because once I start milling, I will lose my layout lines. So I will saw that, remove most of it off camera, I'm not going to show that, and then I'll round it to the layout lines on the belt cylinder. I removed some of the material by sawing, and I have almost a brand new 80 grit belt on the machine, so it's quite aggressive and sharp yet, so it won't take long. That looks pretty good. Now I need a little bit of a flat spot on the top. That can either be done on the milling machine, but let's see what it looks like just by putting the work up against the miter gauge. Well, I've been working all day, and that's just enough fun for today, so I'm going to go up and watch reruns of Jeopardy and continue this tomorrow. And this also concludes part 1 of this 2-part video, so be sure and watch part 2 as well. This is tubalcain saying so long for now.